Let's go. Okay. First of all, let me welcome all of you to this Urban Thinkers Campus, which is organized by Human Habitat and Cities Alliance. And first of all, I'm very thankful that we had huge enthusiasm from the side of the speakers, from the panelists to join this session. And then also, I'm really quite happy that we have such a lot of participants already, and I'm quite sure the numbers will go up again in some more minutes. This campus is on forced migration in cities, so bridging the gap between humanitarian and development nexus and migration and displacement contexts. And it's organized by Cities Alliance and UN Habitat. The Urban Thinkers Campus has got 3 parts. So this is the first session to which I'm welcoming you today. The second one will be on refugee hosting contexts, while the third one, which will then take place in December, is on internal displacement. If you would like any additional information on this Urban Thinkers Campus, please either use the form for registering, then we have your email addresses, or if not, please do not hesitate to reach out to us or share your email in the chat. Also, as I'm just mentioning the chat functions, we will have 2 question and answer sessions during this Urban Thinkers Campus. So we are very happy to take your questions. You can either address them to individual speakers, or you can actually just put them in the chat and we will then read them aloud. This specific Urban Thinkers Campus has a focus on Latin America for a very good reason, and I am quite happy that Cities Alliance representative for Latin America, Ana Claudia Rospos, will actually share some of the information on the Latin American context in the very beginning. And as a final speaker, we have our regional director, Elkin Velasquez, who will resume the Thinkers Campus with an overview and perspectives, an outlook, actually, what is going to happen in the Latin American context. We also have participants and representatives from Colombia, from Brazil, from Ecuador, and Ms. Askfolk from the Swiss Development Corporation in Honduras. So I'm actually quite proud that we managed to get a lot of different country contexts covered during this session. Most migrants move to cities, and 60% of refugees and 80% of IDPs nowadays live in cities. They seek refuge, but of course they also seek better access to services, they seek education for their kids, and they very much seek livelihood opportunities. And cities are in the front line for, giving shelter, but also providing those services. And even though there's a huge opportunity through additional population growth, many cities, and Ana Claudia will surely pick this up, small and intermediate cities often don't have the capacities or the resources actually to deal with additional requests. And cities then tend to be overwhelmed. And as we have seen actually in this global health crisis, cities are actually very capable in many cases to take over the responsibilities as hosts, but also making sure that they include migrants and refugees in their social systems, in their health systems, and also for hosting them. Recent global frameworks actually do acknowledge the role of local authorities, and there needs to be a localization of understanding of the complexity which urban system brings with it. And this is where UN Habitat, of course, has a strong expertise. But it also includes that we have to change the narrative on migrants and refugees in cities, making sure that they're not being seen only as burden, but also as opportunities, as the crucial persons that they are for our urban societies, taking over essential jobs in the health system, for trade, and also restoration and all of the other sectors which are really crucial to our urban societies. Cities are powerful. They're economic, social, and cultural hubs. And so solutions for urban sustainable development and rapid urban growth due to migration and displacement can only be done if we have cross-sectoral cooperation, but also if we have an agreement across the different government levels. And I think this dialogue will actually introduce a lot of the local perspectives, which we're very proud to have. And we hope that there'll also be examples of how different governance levels actually work together. It can also only work if all urban actors are included into decision-making processes. That includes the migrants and displaced people on the one hand, representatives of local communities, but also private sector and civil society actors. I won't take any longer, and I'm now happy to hand over to Ana Claudia Rosbach as our first speaker. She is the Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean. Ana Claudia, over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's very nice to be and co-organizing this Urban Thinker Campus. I started to share my screen. I hope you are already seeing it. It's also very nice to see my fellow companions from Latin America, Elkin, Sofia, Patricia. We have been together in several rides, and I believe we are starting to see the strong community of practice in Latin America, and this is also happening at the global level as well, that is focusing on the aspects of, you know, the urban sector, housing, and how this all has implications in terms of, you know, the migration flow. So the relationships that can be built, the synergies that can be created, combining these aspects. So it's a pleasure to be here and to share some insights and results from our work in Latin America. We have been working collaboratively and building communities of practices at the regional level. UN Habitat has been a great partner with Elkin. Together, we co-organized one housing laboratory focused on the dynamics of migration with the Ministry of Colombia and the Urban Housing Practitioners Hub platform. We are also working in Guatemala and Mexico, nurturing these in-country communities of practices and trying to expand our understanding around these relationships, cities, migration flows, how this all impacts in the urban territory and how policies can respond to that, what are the opportunities. So I would like to share with you some of the insights, and this is what I have on my presentation today. So to start, of course, there are many numbers around the migration dynamics in LAC, and I believe these numbers will be more detailed by my colleagues afterwards. But there are migration flows from Venezuela to Colombia, in South America, migration flows around Central America towards the US, the returning migrants coming back to Central America and the Caribbean countries. So all these dynamics, they put pressure on land, on housing services, and on the overall social services from the cities, right? There's a perception, and actually, I think this is a conclusion, actually, that migrants, they tend to concentrate in informal settlements, right? So we have been observing the expansion of informal settlements, of informal occupations in city centers, for example. And this is a challenge that we already had in Latin America. It's nothing new. The only difference is that now with COVID-19, and the impacts that COVID-19 is having in our cities and population's income, probably this trend, and unfortunately, will increase. So we maybe will witness an expansion of informal settlements in Latin America, and we see that migrants with lower income, without identity in many cases, they tend to be part of this group that is informally occupying the spaces of our cities. Trying to move the slides. Wait a second. Yeah. So, but migration, as Stephanie said, should be seen as an opportunity, right? So it's in addition to the workforce, it brings cultural diversity. It's a driver of city growth. So this is the understanding, that community of practice should be actually helping to seed and to nurture. But we need structures to enable that, right? So we need to have systems to integrate migrants into the local economic and social fabric, in the territories of our cities as well. In order to do that, we need the laws, the national laws, the framework, the policy and legal frameworks to work as an umbrella and an enabling environment to that, right? And therefore we need a shift in policy approach. It's clear that the cities are on the front line. The cities are receiving migrants. So there's a need in shifting policies at the city level and the national level to enable the real effective integration of migrants as an opportunity. So we have also to move from emergency to planning. So it's clear that these dynamics are there. So it's time for us to plan ahead and to include, the right approaches in our policies in order to, enable the capacities of cities as entry points for migrants, expanding the opportunities to access labor, financial inclusion, social protection, education services, but also housing provision, right? They need a shelter, and COVID is telling us people don't have homes to live, how they can stay at home if they don't have homes, right? So there is a need of having structured mechanisms at the city level, communication mechanisms, participation mechanisms, right? And effective governance structures where these migrants also have a voice in the decision-making process of the cities. So there are many cases in Latin America. I will not go into detail. Patricia will come and present the case of São Paulo, which is an exceptional case because Brazil has a very progressive legal framework. Patricia will share. So the city was able to structure a solid, model at the city level to promote the integration of these migrants and access to different policies. The case of Chile, where despite the bottlenecks of the law, the national framework, the national government is creating alternatives to include the migrants in the housing policy, especially in the rental policy. So rent has been perceived as a very adequate alternative for migrants to establish themselves when they arrive in a country and a city. So the government of Chile reshaped their national housing policy, the rental policy, to be able to incorporate this demands represented by migrants. In the case of Colombia, also and we'll have the Colombian speakers, the waves coming from Venezuela right now. The government needs to rethink at the local level to understand what's going on, to have the proper data, but also at the national level, rethink the national policies and see how the housing policy can react. And this is what the Ministry of Colombia is doing, creating proper schemes to receive the migrants. They are also receiving support from development agencies like the IDB to create special schemes, guarantee schemes to migrants being able to access the rental opportunities in cities. The case of Guatemala, Nina will detail later on, but also how high potential of using of migration, of remittances, to as a savings opportunities to create economic alternatives, but also and livelihoods, but also savings for housing, and why not, right? So strengthening capacities at city level to combine all these aspects. The case of Mexico, we see where also, reforms at the national level are being thought to better receive returning migrants from the US, but still, some practices at the city level, state level of integrating migrant flows also from Central America, experiences with housing schemes, rental housing schemes, to shelter and to home these migrants, but there's still a long way to go in terms of improving the national framework to really enable and guarantee the rights of these migrants to access those services and especially housing. So there's a huge challenge. In the case of Uruguay, also an interesting experience funded by the IDB, also related on rental housing. So there's practice in Latin America already. The case of Dominican Republic, I would almost forget, where the private sector, financial institutions, are building proper financial products, to potentialize the economic and financial opportunity given by remittances, and at the same time looking at, the affordability of the demand, of the local demand for housing. So the case of Peru, where the study from the World Bank is looking how informal settlements is being affected, the growth of informal settlements is being affected by the migration flows, and the opportunities also to dynamize the rental markets if this population has access to identification, rights, and opportunities in terms of policies. So just to summarize, what are the main takeaways, right? Migration can turn into a really opportunity for cities, but we need to have an enabling environment. So the national law needs to recognize the rights of migrants to access social services, education services, economic opportunities, and also housing. And this is a bottleneck that we have in most of the countries, I would say in the global south. In Latin America, it's very present. There's a long way to go for us to enable that. If we don't work on this front, it will be very, very difficult for cities at the city level to respond and really integrate the migrants once they arrive in the city, right? Once these national frameworks are in place, so policies, housing policies can be created, like the rental, home improvements, maximizing the potential of remittances. There are many opportunities out there that will have impact in the city's territory. So it's a matter, Stephanie, colleagues and audience, of combining all these aspects, creating the capacities at the city level, the governance structures, the responses at the city level, but also the national frameworks that will enable that to operate and reshape the national policies, the social policies, the housing policies, so that they have a strong approach towards incorporating the migrant population. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ana Claudia. And I think you're right. This cooperation between the different governance levels and across the different sectors is really something that we all need to advocate for. So thank you very much for highlighting this with the different country cases. We've got a slight change in program, so I would now ask our regional director, Mr. Elkin Mascales, to speak, as I understand that he has an urgent meeting to follow. Elkin, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Stephanie, and I'm glad to participate in this event. Thank you also for the flexibility. I will stay for a while, then I will need to move to another conference. But I'm very happy that this collective effort is happening. And of course, I have to say thank you to Cities Alliance for all the joint work that we are actually doing, and Claudia, and please extend our gratitude to Billy as well. All the joint work that we are doing together globally and specifically in Latin America and the Caribbean. I think this is something that is very, very important to send not only the message about the strength that we contribute with in the region, working together with all other institutions, but it's also, by the way, part of the solution to promote as much as possible the collective work of all the networks, all the institutional, let me say, assets and public goods that we have in a region. So that's really very positive, and is already for an urban thinker campus like this one key element that I would like to highlight. Allow me to share a very short presentation Please let me know if you are seeing my slides. Okay, a very short presentation, a little bit from 30,000 meters altitude. I like it, Ana Claudia went to mention specific actions that are already going on in the region, and I would like to take a little bit of altitude in a complementary manner. It is very important to advance towards effective action, of course, going one by one, municipality by municipality, mayor by mayor, hosting community by hosting community, but at the same time to have a kind of overarching perspective, a kind of regional public good perspective as to understand definitely once for all that the migration is a positive dynamics for the world and for Latin America and the Caribbean. If I am asked at this very moment, what are the three main dynamics that are shaping the world, I would immediately say that are climate change, urbanization, and human mobility. Migration, and of course, all what is related to migration. And of course, in a world that is urbanizing, that has to be with the cities. Today, with if we count in the globe international migration, but also national internal migration, we could say something that actually for some is counterintuitive. We could say that 1 in 7 people in the world is a migrant, and that's impressive, and we need to keep this in mind. So it's something that is, let me say, is normal dynamic, and we should do all possible as to provide all the tools from our perspective, technical perspective, policy advisory support perspective, as to integrate these dynamics of migration in the plans for development at national, at subnational, and at local level, as we are now discussing in this very webinar in these Urban Thinker campuses. In Latin America and the Caribbean, this is the general perspective for one, of course, the most important phenomena of migration in the region, but one of them. I'm referring here in this slide to the migration of Venezuelan Latin Americans, or I like to say Latin Americans born in Venezuela, to other Latin American places, to other Latin American countries, mainly in South America. I'm not going to show information about the Central American migration to North America through Mexico, or what is happening with Haitians in the region, or more binational kind of dynamics of migration, historical migration in Central America or in some parts of South America. But of course, the dimensions of the Venezuelan migration in the last years has made an effect, has produced an effect in the region. If we were in 2019, I was to say in this seminar that the two key dynamics shaping Latin American context were migration and, of course, the social unrest that we were seeing in Latin America since 2019. We are still seeing it. We can, of course, elaborate more and say those two phenomena might be, of course, might have linkages and connections. And moreover, at this very moment of the multidimensional crisis of COVID-19, we need also to think the recovery in the context of COVID-19, taking into consideration the phenomena of migration. So here, some data we are, I think, watching one of the biggest migration phenomena in the world. 5.5 million of Venezuelans arriving to Latin American countries, but mainly to Latin American cities. And of course, with all other UN agencies, all other international development partners, we are saying, we are advising states to guarantee their fundamental rights. We need to acknowledge that they are located in cities, and guess what? The poorest, which are a very important portion, the biggest portion of all migrants, are arriving already to those places in cities that are informal, that are precarious, and of course we need to continue paying attention in addition to the individual aspect or the individual considerations and family considerations regarding to migrants, also to the territorial considerations, meaning what is going on, what is happening in those places, in those neighborhoods where migrants are arriving. I will not repeat what Ana Claudia was mentioning in the excellent introduction. Stephanie, you were also sharing with all the audience about how migration needs definitely to be considered as an economic asset for a place based on, of course, on history. I would say that what is important here is to highlight and to stress the fact that we need to act, to intervene with a double perspective at the same time. A short-term perspective, the emergency humanitarian interventions, but also with a long perspective at the same time. Let us not forget, the long term and the short term starts the same day. So it's easy to say, but we need really to work much more around the mechanisms, the policy tools, the instruments, the way to finance as to support, and I will insist on that, municipalities and local governments to not only provide support in the humanitarian moment, but to start from the very beginning, from the very humanitarian action to prepare for the future, for successful socioeconomic integration. In that preparation comes with a number of actions like utilizing the proper policy instruments, to utilize the proper, the proper guidance, advisory support, capacity development in local authorities. And I am not referring here to the biggest cities, Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, Bogota, Mexico, let us keep in South America, Quito, Lima. I'm referring to mainly to the biggest number of cities that are receiving migrants from Venezuela, that are hosting migrants from Venezuela, the intermediary cities, in some cases, the small towns that are also hosting Venezuelans. Of course, in terms of numbers, we need to support the biggest cities. In Peru, we know we need to support a lot of Lima, but we also need to go to those places and to share, to partner with local authorities that are perhaps more in need of this cooperation. This is also a little bit the way that as we are seeing this. There is another message that I would like to convey to this conversation, is that we don't need to start from scratch. We also already have some global frameworks that have been adapted regionally, have been adapted nationally. The SDGs framework, we continue advancing on the voluntary local reviews as to understand where is it that we are in the implementation of SDGs. We continue advancing on supporting countries on the voluntary national reviews as to understand where is it that the countries are with the SDGs implementations. This is a very important framework because if you look at it very carefully, you will understand that you can actually have that impact in a positive and proactive socioeconomic integration for migrants applying the SDGs. That's something very, very powerful. And also the New Urban Agenda. We have been advancing since 2016 in the implementation of the New Urban Agenda at national level and at local level. and let me say this in this way. If a city is already applying properly the new urban agenda, the right to the city that is at the core of the new urban agenda, this city is already prepared to positively, dynamically, and in a proactive way integrate also the migrants. So in a way, migration gives us and gives local authorities, local communities, a kind of mirror to see where they are in the implementation of those global agendas, global development agendas. Because I think we share also one message, is that integrating migrants goes hand in hand, goes in parallel with supporting hosting communities. We really need to work with the two at the same time, as to, for instance, facilitate the prosperity of the two, as to prevent xenophobia, as to create those positive imaginaries of multicultural, multi-experience conversation that is going to be good for all and everyone in every neighborhood in Latin America and the Caribbean. We have a lot to say regarding what can be done by cities. And I will not certainly be as explicit as the representatives of the cities that are going to intervene in this Urban Thinker campus. By the way, all our support, all our recognition of the hard work that you are doing. And we are here really to hear to you, and also when we add value as this network of, or this alliance of different institutions, we are there to support you at that moment. So, of course, there are a number of activities, and I would not like to go one by one, but I want to say that a very important intervention and action from the local perspective is precisely integration. We know that it's very easy to go from a sectoral perspective to support integration of migrants, whether it is about housing, about education, about prevention of situations of insecurity for women and children, for instance, a number of sectoral actions and policies that we need, of course, to provide support to migrants. But the one thing that is easier to say than to actually apply in the field is the integration. What we know from evidence is that every time that we see an integrated package of policy support to migrants and hosting communities with an area-based perspective, meaning focusing neighborhoods, focusing specific areas in cities, the positive positive impacts come faster. That we have measured and we know from evidence, and this is something that we would like to share with you. And it is important, of course, to create these ecosystems of alliances with other stakeholders, not only with stakeholders from the public sector, but also from private sector, from international cooperation. We are there to work with you and to add value where you see we have value. Of course, with other civil society organizations. So this is a very important role. And of course, it has to be with the leadership and the space for developing this leadership that is given from other levels of the government in a particular country, from the national government perspective. And of course, it has to be also with the framework of, for instance, decentralization, distribution of public resources, public funds in a country. We know that it has to be with that. But the message for all is, it is very important, the leadership from the local perspective, and if we want really to advance and to make a faster difference. The second message is about the planning tools.
I'm very sorry. We have a lot of.
Yeah, I will finalize,
really bad interrupting
Stephanie.
you.
No, not at all. is how do we utilize the planning tools? If we really want this interinstitutional coordination in a territorial perspective, this is about, of course, neighborhoods, and this is about the city as a whole. And one of the tools, the best tools to address and to facilitate this integration is planning tools. There is a lot in that perspective. Planning precedes implementation, and the implementation that is properly planned, of course, will transform faster and will have better impact. And this, of course, is setting the scene for the socioeconomic integration that needs to happen in this perspective. I would like just to finalize with this message. And of course, is that adequate attention to migration is a great opportunity, as it has been already said here, to address urban challenges regarding development, innovation, and peaceful coexistence. So migrants can be the actors, the newcomers that are going to also trigger this new perspective for a territory. And this is nothing different in the end than the opportunity to materialize the right to the city. I thank you for your attention, and I hope that this conversation will help us to continue building public goods for Latin America and the Caribbean. Back to you, Stephanie.
Thank you very much, Elking, and sorry for raising the issue about time. I'm very thankful you picked up many things, including the area-based approach, including that we need to have interventions that benefit both host and migrant communities. You brought up the role of, COVID having changed our life and including migration patterns. And also you mentioned the different global frameworks. So thank you very much for setting the scene for the speakers. And I was actually quite happy to see that you did have a picture from Cúcuta in Colombia in your presentation, because that is a perfect overview to the next speaker. The next speaker is Mr. Juan Diego Peña, who's the Deputy Officer of Productivity and Competitiveness of Cúcuta in Colombia. So, Mr. Peña, over to you, and we're happy to hear about what solutions cities have found specifically to the problems that are already highlighted by Elkin and also Ana Claudia. Thank you. Over to you.
Am I sharing my screen now? So I'm going to talk about Cúcuta, a city forged by mixed migration flows. I'd like to start with some context on our city. We are located in Colombia, in the north of South America. We are in the border with Venezuela. Actually, my house and my office is less than 10 minutes from Venezuela. We have been historically, socially, and economically very, very connected and integrated with Venezuela. Actually, my father was born there, so I'm also Venezuelan. Most families in Cúcuta have or had relatives in the other country, while the agriculture and industrial sectors in our city have been relatively small. The commercial sector has been our main source of income for decades. And this, again, has been explained by the close relationship we have with our neighbor. However, that relationship has been changing over the last years. According to official data, our city has close to 800,000 inhabitants. If we count the inhabitants on the metropolitan area, that's 5 small cities surrounding Cúcuta, we are 1 million people. And that number has been growing because of migration. Colombia has had a policy of open borders, as well as extending healthcare and protection to Venezuelans. We have a border of more than 2,000 kilometers, so migration will come legally or illegally. As Elkin was saying, more than 5 million people have left Venezuela in the past 15 years.
We cannot see your screen. Sorry, it's just sorry to interrupt you, but
All right, let me check. Okay.
now we can see it. Thank you very much. Yeah, now we can see it. Perfect. Thank
All
you.
right. Let me go back to. Okay, so Cucuta is the main exit door for Venezuelans. In Colombia, we have around 1.7 million Venezuelans living right now. Around 100,000 of those Venezuelans are currently in Cucuta. That's roughly 20% of our, 15% of our population. More than half of them are not regular. I mean, they don't have official IDs, which is a challenge in terms of integration to society. Also, we have a pendular population, around 35,000 people who live in the nearby Venezuelan cities that come to work, study, shop, visit family, or use health services and come back during the same day. Also, we have around 40,000 Colombians who had migrated before to Venezuela and now returned to Colombia. We have a very, very beautiful green city with hotels, restaurants, malls, schools, but we face many challenges. Poverty went up 5% last year to 45%, and that was before COVID. Unemployment had been around 15% before COVID and now jumped to 28% in the last measure we had. Informality is also an issue. Around 70% of the workers are not formal. And we also deal with smuggling of raw materials, of gasoline, for example, displaced people forced by the local violence. And also we have the presence of illegal groups. So in this slide, I wanted to show the evolution of unemployment in Cucuta compared to unemployment in Colombia over the last 2 decades. During the first decade, unemployment in Cucuta was totally correlated with unemployment in Colombia. However, in the last decade, from 2012, 2013 until now, this relationship changed. Our unemployment rate has been consistently higher, and it is correlated to the economic collapse of Venezuela, our main partner, as I was saying. Venezuela's GDP have been plummeting in the last years, and that's the graph we see below. So Colombia and Cucuta have been very open to migrants, and that create challenges. The flow of migrants have incidence on the, for example, on the demand for health services and education services, which have been growing at rates that basically outpace our local capacity and even the national capacities. I wanted to bring this example. This is a headline from the local newspaper last year. 70% of newborns in the local hospital are from Venezuelan mothers, 70%. And this creates a financial challenge in the present, but also for the future, since newborns acquire citizen rights in Colombia, even if their parents are Venezuelans. This is one of our main crossing points, how it looked like before COVID. Now, because of sanitary issues, is closed. But so I wanted to say again that Colombia has very open policies towards migration, even against mild public opposition. So how are we tackling these challenges? Our development plan is divided into 6 different dimensions, all of which acknowledge our new reality and the need to provide special attention to vulnerable people, migrants, and victims, so that they can integrate into society and be productive, always in a context of an open government, citizen participation, and permanent social dialogue, and always related to the Sustainable Development Goals. For the first time in the history of Cucuta, this year we created an office exclusively to articulate initiatives with international cooperation agents. We really need help in this context. So as the Office for Social and Economic Development, we are in charge of the third line, competitiveness for economic development. Our main goals are to strengthen the local capabilities, to enhance productivity, to build human capital, and to reduce barriers for investment and growth. So we are aware of the need of incorporating the strengths of migrants, refugees, and returnees into the economic and social development of the city. Just as an example, right now we are allied with a local university, providing free courses on project management for local leaders, but also for migrants. There is also a need for communicating the positive impacts of migration so we can avoid xenophobia or reduce it. The number of companies started by Venezuelans have been growing. Remittances to our city have been growing. Last year, we had more than $100 million in remittances from countries such as USA, Spain, Chile, and that had helped the local economy. On the other hand, migrants' demand for local products was also growing at two-digit rates last year. Also, considering that 90% of our territory is rural, but is creating only 2% of the jobs we have and grow only about 3% of the food we eat, we have developed strategies to enhance our agricultural sector, like providing technical assistance, access to credit, training of the peasants, and improving their sales channel. We believe that the rural area has the potential to offer plenty of opportunities for many of our migrants. In our development plan, we also have strategic projects, 40 multi-sector and multi-level governmental initiatives, which particularly stimulate development for the city. One of them is called Inclusive Cities, Solidarity Communities, for the integration of migrants and refugees under the support of the European Union and implementation of UN Habitat, IOM, and the United Nations HCR. The goals for this project are the characterization of the migratory dynamics and the host communities, the land use planning to integrate settlements with a high density of migrants, creating income-generating projects for migrants and host communities, strengthening the capabilities of public institutions and civil society. That's a really important point. And knowledge management by systematizing best practices, training, and exchanging, just as today we're doing. As our mayor often say, migration brings opportunities, but we have to act. We can't plant migration. Migration can be seeds, and we can harvest development. Finally, I would like to share some pictures of my beautiful Cucuta. We look forward to having you here in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peña, and we very much appreciate you really also try to stick to time. And thank you for showing the pictures. And I actually do hope that some of our participants can actually make it in the near future to visit your city.
Hope to have you here.
Thank you very much also for underlining the point that migrants, while on the one hand, of course, are causing constraints for city services, also really are important as consumers, are important for, as labor force, and are also receiving remittances, which again they spend in cities and invest in cities. So thank you very much also for really highlighting those positive points of migration. And
a pleasure.
That's very important. Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Fatima Fernandez, and Fatima, you are presenting not a Latin American focus, but you are introducing very much the global perspective of the United Cities and local governments. So over to you, Fatima.
Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Thanks a lot, colleagues, for having counted on us today. And also thank you for the really great previous presentations that are already a very nice introduction for for me to push this conversation. So what I will try to do without just duplicating what has already been done, been said mainly, is to present you a little bit, as Stephanie was saying, not only what UCLG is and how do we approach the issue of migration and try to support cities, but I think that my key point at this stage would be to demonstrate with this how, to the extent to which migration is a key element in the agenda of local governments, despite really narrow mandates and scarce resources. And having just heard from the colleague from Cucuta on the very diverse kind of realities that one city might face during the time and in changing circumstances, I think that this will even make more sense. So, well, although I guess that most of you already know, United Cities and Local Governments is the largest membership-based association of local governments, coming from the municipalist movement, which is a century-old movement that has worked for a century on promoting decentralization, and also, very important, decentralized cooperation, just acknowledging the role of cities as innovators and pragmatic actors that really react to reality, even in contexts where they lack the resources or the experiences or the mandate. And just to give you an overview, although I am speaking from the World Secretariat in Barcelona, we are very much connected to all the regional sections of UCLD, where, for instance, in America, we have the colleagues from Flagma and Mercociudades doing really great job already, also on the issue of migration, and I will go to that later. So this is it's the key message for me is that last year in the UCLD World Congress, we saw for the first time migration very, very high in the agenda of the World Municipal Movement. This to say that it is not only a regional issue or an issue that is important for a kind of cities. Our constituency, which is made from more than 250,000 local governments and local governments association, has acknowledged that migration is among the key topics they need to address, and where not only cooperation is needed, but also advocacy in front of national governments and international entities. So what you see in the picture is the manifesto on migration that the constituency of United Cities and Local Governments did, acknowledging migration first and foremost as a natural phenomenon, and of course then as an opportunity for innovation and development in cities, and of course reminding that, as we have been hearing for the whole session, that cities are at the front line, providing basic services and being key actors to tackle inclusion, social cohesion, and in this I would recall Elkin's words on the importance of working with host communities, and also the role of cities in tackling discrimination in many shapes and on many aspects. So, of course, one of the other statements that was important on that manifesto is the endorsement of global agendas on migration, and the engagement in pursuing that whole of government approach and whole of society approach. And finally, just as an important element of local government advocacy in the issue of migration is that they really have the the key capacities to shift the narrative on migration. So these were some of the elements, and it's important to understand that in order to get there, there has been a really long-standing work from many regions of the world and many different kinds of cities to reach out to that agreement, whereby they acknowledge that they lack what is needed to play the key role that they are playing. So in general terms, how do we approach the subject at UCLG? What does it mean that it is in our agenda? And how do we try to support cities? So we have different layers of collaboration with cities and of support to cities, and within the organization and as an association, there are different levels of governance and cooperation that allow cities to advance in this agenda when they are interested in that. On the one hand, we have the community of practice on migration, which is a space for cities to share their concerns, their realities, to promote joint work strengths at technical level. And this falls within the Policy Council on the Right to the City, which of course entails other areas, and for us it is so important that really important policy elements that are for us, like informality, accessibility, and so on and so forth, are connected to for instance, the issue of migration or basic service delivery, and so on and so forth. So this we managed to connect it to the Policy Council on the Right to the City. Then there are more, for sure, in this new context that we are all facing, also some new ad hoc strands of work, together with our colleagues from UN Habitat and with Metropolis, our metropolitan section. We've been, since the outbreak of COVID, promoting a series of live learning experiences that try to reproduce a work we usually try to do in physically in cities, our decentralized cooperation on different topics. So we've been having a really long-standing conversation on very different topics with very different cities from the world, and including migration among those topics. From those conversations that took like 4 months, we saw each other weekly during those 4 months. We have come up with a platform that sums up all the outcomes of those conversations. We have videos, we have some policy elements that we took away from those sessions, and I will be happy to share that in the chat later. We are also just kicking off a massive open course that is based also on those contents in order to keep feeding that learning process. Also, we see that the UCLG Decalogue for the post-COVID era, which is more of the political statement from the local constituency for a better and different recovery. We do have also cities very keen on acknowledging migration and the capacity to govern it properly as being key in reconstruction. This is just to say that this doesn't happen in one day, and this doesn't happen alone just because UCLG alone has been working on that. And among our stronger efforts at the advocacy level, what we have been trying to do is going in a coordinated manner with other constituencies, other actors, other partners to the global level, and push for local governments to have the seat they need at the table. Because as my colleagues were saying before from Cities Alliance and UN Habitat, I mean, of course, the willingness to act is there, but the legal frameworks, sometimes even when the willingness is there, when even resources are found, do not allow cities to face the realities in the territories as they would like to. So, and this is just from 2016, but we've been working for way longer at UCLG and together with other partners on this. And I just want to highlight a couple of issues here. One is the Marrakesh Majors Declaration made in the context of the Global Forum for Migration and Development, which, as you might know, is a state-led process of informal conversations about migration governance, where majors have just gained a seat very recently in 2018, and together with IOM and the Majors Migration Council, we are trying to facilitate that conversation happens in a substantive way, and that those partnerships bring real results to the ground, and that local efforts are elevated to the right level of the conversation, right? We have that, and we have, of course, now the Global Compact on Migration process of implementation and monitoring just being set in motion, and we are very happy to say that we are there. We are facilitating the participation of local governments there, and ahead of the International Migration Review Forum. Together with our partners, we are sure that we will our efforts to have the cities' voices heard, and these having an impact in the legal framework, which is at the end of the day the most important outcome. We're sure that this will happen. And just coming back to a regional perspective, and just to close my intervention here, I am also happy to share the fact that also at international level and international conversation, we see that the regional dimension is really taking a really important role in the global conversation. And we saw this in the Global Forum for Migration and Development this year, and we are about to see this at the process of the review of the Global Compacts for Migration. And we do think it is a really important aspect because, first of all, from UCLG side, it really reflects also our thinking, our way of structuring of our work. It is a really strong opportunity for us to have regional sections directly involved and a way to acknowledge that cooperation needs to happen at territorial level. So it's a way of decentralizing this multilateral conversation, which is important to have. But first of all, it is important also to know which are the realities in the ground, which are the actors involved. And what we saw, for instance, in the conversation about the Americas was, for instance, a really great appetite for partnerships with the national level, but also with other territories and cities involved, acknowledging also the weight of the migratory routes, also the importance of having advocating for more regular pathways for migration, be it seasonal migration or other kinds of migration. We have been local leaders also speaking about informality very openly, and we do think that these are just some of the elements that demonstrate that local governments not only deserve to be there, but when they are there, they do change the conversation, and they change the conversation about the narrative about migrants, but also about what is needed to a well-governed human mobility that is for the benefit of everyone. So I will leave it here, and thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Fatima. And well, thanks first of all for in the GFMD and its mechanism, where UCLG does play an important role, and also for re-underlining the point about the whole of society and the whole of government approach, because I think this is really something that we're all jointly advocating for, exactly this, well, dialogue between the different government levels, but also the inclusion of the different stakeholders. I am now very happy to introduce Ms. Patricia Dichten-Kenyan. She is the coordinator of the Secretariat for Human Rights and Citizenships in Sao Paulo. And I'm very keen on actually hearing more about your work and what Sao Paulo does for human rights in the migrant space. Thank you very much, Patricia.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Thank you very much, everyone. Can you see my... Okay, perfect. So, I will use this intervention to talk a little bit more about our access to rights and humanitarian aid during COVID-19 pandemic and our experience as the largest city of South America, let's say, during this period. First of all, I'd like just to emphasize Brazil's migration regulatory framework. As Mrs. Ana Claudia pointed earlier, we have a progressive legislation regarding our national and municipal migration. So we had an important overhaul in our legislation in 2017. Before the National Migration Law of 2017 used to have another one that goes back to the dictatorship time from 1980 that considered migrants as potential national security threats. So the National Migration Law of 2017 is actually an important shift in our paradigm when it comes to see migrants as people who have rights and demands, and they are welcome, and they are important to they are part of the solution of the problems in our city. And it's so the national law establishes principles and guidelines for migration public policy. Guarantees equal and free access for migrants to public services and programs, social benefits, public goods, education, legal assistance, work, housing, banking, and social security, as well as access to all our welfare systems. And it's really important to point out the National Migration Law of 2017 because actually the Municipal Law of the Municipal Law of 2016 actually inspired the national law. So it's really funny to see how actually normally it's the national law that is the guidelines for the municipal law, but as São Paulo developed an important and progressive approach regarding migration. Since I would say since the end of the 19th century, we have migration and migrants and refugees in Brazil, and I myself. I'm granddaughter of Armenian genocide survivor who came to São Paulo looking for opportunities. So I would say that in Brazil. I would say that we are pretty much I'm really proud of the city of creating this framework. So the municipal law considers migration as a cross-cutting phenomenon in public policies. So at the national level, we ensure migrants access to social rights and public services, diversity and interculturalism, preventing rights violations, and we promote social participation, as I'm gonna present shortly. So it's really important as well that our public services are for all, regardless of their gender or migration and documentary status. We never use the expression illegal, of course, but even if they are, if they don't have the papers, the necessary documentation, we don't care. They will be able to access all our public services, educational, health, and welfare systems. So São Paulo is the largest and most diverse migrant population city in the country. We have over 360 million thousand migrants in regular condition in São Paulo from over 100 different regular migrants. We got that this number may go to 5 migrants. They represent around 4% of our population, but when we consider a population of 12 million persons, so we would say that 4% is considerable as well. We have people mainly from Bolivia, people from Haiti, Argentina, Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, more and more, of course. But we also have people coming from European countries as well, Spain, Italy, Portugal, as well as Asian countries. Now we have a historical migration coming from Japan. We have like the largest Japanese community outside Japan in the world. So it's a funny random fact. Normally, people outside São Paulo, outside Brazil, they don't know that. And most of the time they think that the Japanese here are Chinese, but actually they're Japanese. And they're like in the 4th, 6th generation already. But now we have more and more Chinese and Koreans as well. Regarding specific policies for the migrant population, I would say that we have our reference and reception center for migrants, which was created in 2014. So it's our open door policy. So whenever a migrant or refugee comes to São Paulo, normally the first step, the first place they go is our reference and reception center, which is part of our duties in the Secretariat for Human Rights and Citizenship. We have also 4 shelters for migrants, over 550 beds, and our goal is to go over 800 beds until places for them to stay until 2024. And one of the most important policies that we created in the past few years is the Municipal Council for Migrants. So it's an unique place in Brazil, at least, where we foster social participation. So we have 35 representatives, and 50% of them are women. So we have a gender balanced approach. And it's important to highlight the council, because that's the place where not only social participation, but they actually help us supervising and monitoring and creating their social policy, their policies, public policies for them. It's really important because in Brazil, so we have a progressive national law since 2017. Migrants, because of our constitution and because of all the religious constraints, they're not able to vote nor to be voted. So that's the only place in Brazil, actually, that migrants have this political participation where their votes actually count. So one of the programs that was bred from the Municipal Council was the Open Door, Portuguese for Migrants, which we call Portas Abertas. So we had over so since 2019 we had over 2,050 people migrants and refugees enrolled. So they have access to Portuguese classes. Since Portuguese is not English nor Spanish or French, I don't know, or Chinese, it's not a language that all migrants know or have experience with. So we provide free classes for them in at least 15 different public schools in São Paulo. So it was an initiative of breaking the language barrier that we realized was important for their social insertion and social participation more broadly. And another important milestone was our first municipal policy for migrants that we launched on August 2020 with the help of UNHCR and IOM. So we built this municipal policy with at least six hands, let's say. And it's really important because this year of COVID-19 pandemic and everything that's going on in Brazil, we created an important milestone that's gonna serve as as a direction for our public policies in the next 4 years. So we have at least 80 actions that we have to implement until 2024. So it creates an important framework and an important guide for from where we will start working in the next month. So we have not only medium-term consequences, but actually in the long term as well. So I don't have a lot of time. So where do migrants live? Normally in the east side of the city, and challenges regarding housing. So housing, formal rental contracts, homeless situation, land occupation. So these are important challenges that we face. We have the shelters, and we have specific domestic and municipal departments as well, as Mrs. Ana Claudia pointed out earlier in this discussion. So access to housing policies are important. But just to finish my intervention, so the first municipal plan is one of the most important projects that we developed in this year during the COVID-19 pandemic. We also kept all our services open during even during the quarantine measures, and 1 month know that São Paulo was really affected. Brazil is the third most affected country, and São Paulo was the main city affected by COVID. And even though we were in this situation, we never closed our doors because we knew that human rights violations would be ongoing. So all our lawyers, our social assistants, etc., they were working for all migrants that needed help. So just to finish, an important project that we created this year was Cidade Solidária, which means in English Solidary City, was a humanitarian assistance project. These figures are from May to October, but it is still ongoing. So we delivered over 2 million basic food baskets, over 1 million sanitary and hygiene kits, over 1 million lunchbox for people in vulnerability, mostly homeless people, and also 42,000 books in those baskets as well. Books about African Brazilian history, books about Brazilian history, books about human rights overall. And these are for all people in situations of vulnerability in São Paulo. And these numbers are for migrants and refugees. So we created a specific VIP list for migrants and refugees. So we created, it's really important for us working as government to create partnerships with civil society and other stakeholders on local level. So we created an important partnership with at least 20 different migrant and refugee entities and consulates in São Paulo that would help us to deliver to all the migrants and refugees that need help. So we have this list of those partners. We created a contract, not a contract, but like a term of cooperation with them. So in May, June, July, August, September, October, those are the figures of the quantity that we almost 60,000 kits and baskets were delivered to specifically for migrants and refugees. So in this picture, it's the Senegalese Association in São Paulo when they were receiving, but they receive every month. I talk to the leader every month, and they're really happy for engaging this project with us. So this is with the people from Latin America. Those are people as well from the Bolivian community, people from the Angeles, Senegalese, Congolese community in São Paulo as well. And also, Solidary City is a partnership that we created with the Red Cross, with the Brazilian Red Cross as well. So basically, we triangle this initiative, local government, civil society, and the Red Cross, because they have the expertise with the humanitarian disasters, and we knew that we needed their help as well in order to ensure those delivering in 6 months over 2 million baskets and kits for the people in situations of vulnerability. So just to finish, I would say that this year we are focused on giving the humanitarian approach in the short term. We know that those measures are for the short term, but they are necessary in a situation where people are losing their jobs. We realize that we have at least over 16% more people living on the streets since the beginning of the pandemic in São Paulo. So we need to address this issue. But we also built our municipal plan for the next 4 years, thinking about medium and long-term projects as well. And we kept our services open during the pandemic in order to ensure that everything that we created till nowadays, people would have access to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Thank you very much for this presentation and for sharing, well, not only the impressive interventions done by the city of Sao Paulo, but also, well, for the information how national and municipal laws can actually influence each other and should influence each other. And I think it's great to hear that Sao Paulo now has a municipal council for immigrants. And well, from my learning, it was also very interesting that you said that Sao Paulo has 200 nationalities. So it actually sounds like a very diverse background. And I actually always think that multiculturalism is one of the main assets of the city. And thank you very much for sharing your own story. I think that is something that makes it very personal, because I think most of us are actually migrants in the places where they live. So thank you very much also for this small side note. I would now like to give the floor to our audience before we have Ms. Sofia Acre speaking from Ecuador and before we have Mina Asfalk speaking from Honduras. So I'd be happy to take any questions from the floor. You can either use your hand raising button, which I hope most of you will have found by now, or you can also put a question in the chat. Let me see and let me check with my colleagues if someone has seen a question which I might have missed in the chat. But please, anybody who has a question to any of the panelists, over to you.
Hi, Stephanie. At the moment, no one has raised their hands, so I think it's safe to say we can proceed also.
Okay, so if there's any interest to ask a question, also after the next speaker, which will be Ms. Sofia Acre, please raise your hand. I think we have enough time. We've got 2 more presentations before wrapping up, so please feel free to raise your hand and ask questions also to the participants. Happy now that Madame Sofia Acre will now speak. She's the Director General for International Relations and Cooperation of Cuenca in Ecuador. Sofia, over to you. Very much looking forward to it.
Thank you. Good morning to you all. Good afternoon. Well, today I am going to present about some of the actions that the municipality of Cuenca has implemented in order to complete actions with the local government, the regional government, and the national government. So if you can see my screen, yes? Well, today I am going to talk about first from the general perspective, then to the local, and then specifically to the Migrants House. That is a program that the municipality of Cuenca has implemented for almost 20 years. Well, if we talk about the national context in the Ecuadorian legislation, that is on the Constitution and also on the organic law of human mobility, people in human mobility are considered as vulnerable population. That is all the people who are immigrants, migrants, refugees, victims of crimes of trafficking in persons, all of them are considered with the same rights, duties as an Ecuadorian citizen. Also, migration is recognized as a human right. So no human being is illegal because of their immigration status. The attention and implementation of a migratory policy is promoted in a framework of joint responsibility between the different levels of the government. That is all. The national government, the regional government, and of course the local government, that is the one that I am going to talk about. The migratory flows of foreigners in Ecuador can be divided into two types. The refugees, the ones that have the legal status of a refugee, and population in transit. And I have some data, and as of September of 2020, more than 69,000 people have been recognized as refugees in Ecuador, and more than 95% of them are of Colombian nationality. Also, the country is home of more than 400,000 refugees and migrants from Venezuela. According to the UNHCR, Ecuador is one of the Latin American countries that has most recognized refugees in Latin America. So if we go to the local context, in Cuenca, there have been several policies in order to supply the needs of the people who are on human mobility situation or are in immigrant situation. So if we talk about the actions at a local level, we have to say that legislation has been key. We have a new specific local regulation for people in a situation of human mobility. And this local regulation has been built in a participatory way. And it also includes international guidelines as the Sustainable Development Goals and the new urban agenda. There is a joint model that has been constituted with different local actors, civil society organizations, migrants association, and non-governmental association in order to work for this specific issue. And also there is been an important participation of international organizations for the consolidation, and we also search to focus their work on the territory. So if we talk about the local level, the La Casa del Migrante or the Migrants House program, this is a program that is mainly an articulating entity which links the necessities of the people who are on human mobility to many of the care programs of the municipality of Cuenca and also of the public and private entities with whom the municipality work. So many of the services that a Migrants House provides to migrants is food and clothing, attention in cases of violence, health, a service of health with the municipal hospital, legal advice, productive entrepreneurship. We link the persons who are in mobility to the productive programs of the municipality, education, awareness campaigns. We work with many awareness campaigns in the municipality and also with technological services. So some of the sensibilizations campaigns that the House of Migrants has implemented is a conversation about the World Day Against Human Trafficking in Latin America. This conversation was performed with the help of international organizations. Also, another campaign that was performed last year was Negocio Mortal from the UNODC. This campaign was aimed to inform the migrants about the risks involved in hiring traffickers to leave irregularly their countries of origin. So here you can see on blue suit, the mayor of Cuenca. He was in charge of the national launch of this campaign together with the people of the UNODC. Also, the Migrants House program has delivered legal provisions with the help with the Cantonal Board of Right Protections. This specific legal program was aimed to guarantee the rights of children and teenagers who were on the streets. This program, this legal provision was launched on September of last year, but it was especially reinforced during the confinement period in Cuenca due to COVID-19. Also, in between the services that the Migrants House provides to persons in mobility is an info center where, well, they have technology services, and thanks to this, can be in contact with their family abroad, but especially they have the assessment to carry out documentation in order to regularize their immigration status. Also, well, through the Migrants House program, we have also delivery school supplies to minors in a situation of human mobility. This was thanks also to two international organizations, and around 170 students received these school supplies in Cuenca during the pandemic. Another service, through the Municipal Food Bank, it was possible to sustain and to give to people in human mobility food kits during the pandemic. There were 25,000 beneficiaries. 50% of them were people in human mobility. So this is just a few data, so you can see the importance of the Migrants House. From July to October of this year, there had been 75 social attentions, 54 deliveries of victuals and food, 55 children were attended with school supplies, 41 minors were directed to the educational system. So you can see here how we not only act with the municipality of Cuenca, but also with the ministries of health, with ministries of education. There had been also 20 people treated in medical brigades. 90 people received legal advice about visas, deportation, labor claim, evictions, and also the Migrants House has support to the placement of people in temporary shelters around Cuenca. So in conclusion, to reduce the gap between humanitarian system and development, we can see that in Cuenca, first, there is no discrimination against an immigration status. Also, there is a comprehensive identification of the needs of the migrants or displaced population carried out, not only immediate attention if offered. And that is something that I link with the presentation of Elkin. He was talking about that cities not only have to give a primary support to the migrants, but also to facilitate their integration into the society. So the municipality of Cuenca also provide them with access to the municipal house programs with the movie that is a municipal public company, and also introduce them in the programs that work with entrepreneurs. So in Cuenca, we always also look to have the support of international organizations, maintaining an intercultural and a supportive vision. So my presentation ends here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Thank you. That was great. And well, first of all, again, it's impressive. And as I said before, it's really impressive what different cities in the region, but all over the world, have really come up with innovative solutions to make sure, you know, that migrants are supported. And as you put it, I think that is a very important point, to foster their integration into the urban societies, and also make sure that they become self-reliant, because I think that is something that many migrants actually hope for. So thank you very much for sharing that. I think that's a very important point. You also mentioned a point that I would like to take up a bit later after Nina's presentation, the point on, you know, how things changed in your city due to the COVID pandemic, because I think that is something that we really could bring out a bit more, and maybe all of the panelists would like to think in their final conclusion words about how the situation has changed and how they've actually how they see future moving forward, specifically in this area of migrant migration, but also, and I think that is an important point, you mentioned that Cuenca actually has two parts, or sort of two main people, one the refugees and the others the population in transit. And I think, I mean, for us working mainly on cities, that is something that, you know, we're happy that this is in the hands of IOM, but I think specifically the populations in transit are also a really important group to focus on, because they do need a lot of support as well. So thank you for mentioning this point. Before we take the last couple of questions, and before we actually then hand over for a short resume from Ana Claudia, but also from the panelists, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Nina Astfald, who is the Deputy Head of Cooperation for the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, SDC, in Honduras. So Nina, over to you, and happy to see what, or happy to learn what actually sort of the partners can do that are supporting the different organizations and supporting the different countries and cities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Or good afternoon, good evening to. I'm to say quickly, they are doing some work. I hope this will work. So as Stephanie said, I'm currently based in Honduras, and from here I am following up on the country component Guatemala of the joint work program on cities and migration that Cities Alliance and SDC are currently implementing jointly. And well, the phase that we are implementing right now started in 2018 and lasts until 2021. A quick overview over the program, but I don't want to go into detail. The joint work program on cities and migration has 4 objectives. It aims at strengthening inclusive migration governance in cities. Then it wants to strengthen local authorities and key stakeholders in their abilities to receive, manage, and integrate not only labor migrants, but also to receive and integrate migrants that are forced to leave their place of origin. And then as a 4th component, the program aims at building global partnerships and advocacy around the aforementioned questions and problematics. Apart from Guatemala, the joint work program is being implemented in 4 partner countries of Cities Alliance, namely in Tunisia, Uganda, Ethiopia, and Kenya, and there are also 2 learning cities from Somalia participating in the program. In my brief presentation, I will give you a short overview of the migration context in Central America. I focus especially on Guatemala, and then I describe the main activities that are being implemented in Guatemala under the joint work program. And my presentation is a little bit different than the other ones, because since I'm coming from the donor perspective, you will realize it's I'm talking more from a strategic level, so it's more like an overview. I cannot see my presentation, Philip, if you I don't know. So, but anyway, if there is a presentation, it would be okay to go now to the slide 2, where we have a picture. So considering Central America.
Nina, just wait a second. So Philip is not
yet
sharing. Now he is, let me just give you the tone. He's ready now, and he will go straight to slide.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Nina.
Okay, so considering Central America, as many of you might know, and it has been mentioned briefly before, Ana Claudia mentioned it. Well, for decades, migration has been and continues to be one of the strong characteristics of the sub-regions. Very well known are the migration flows from Central American countries and from Mexico towards the United States. And well, regarding the latter, we are all familiar with a new phenomenon of recent years, the so-called caravanas de migrantes. In the picture, you see the last caravan that has left Honduras in the beginning of October of this year, but the caravan did not. It did reach the Guatemalan border, but then was already stopped and detained there. So the migrants were sent back to the city where they started the caravan. At the same time, in Central America, we are also seeing an increase in the numbers of irregular migrants living in the countries of the regions. This is due, for example, to an increase in general in immigration flows, but also due to the complexity and the high costs of regularization processes, or also of the limited capacities of some governments to enforce immigration laws. And one characteristic that is shared by migrants in this region across the countries, independently of their individual capacity to manage migration, is the high incidence of migrants in irregular situation. And due to the high insecurities and high levels of crime that we have in this region, migrants here are very vulnerable, especially to discrimination, but also abuse, extortion, kidnapping, human rights trafficking, and especially women to sexual violence and other crimes. So focusing now on Guatemala, Guatemala is one of the most unequal countries in Central America. 67% of the country's population lives in conditions of poverty, and 70% of the economically active population works in the informal sector. And also the migration dynamics in Guatemala are very complex. We have internal migration. Then we have also transitory migration to Guatemala from other countries in the region. And then we have, of course, also the migration from Guatemala to the United States. And then connected to this phenomenon, we have the voluntary but also involuntary return from migrants to Guatemala. And in terms of reasons for that motivate a person to migrate in Guatemala, mostly it's economic incentives that they have to leave their hometown. And it's estimated that about 7% of the total population of Guatemala lives actually in other countries. So that would make about, if I'm not mistaken, about like every fifth Guatemalan has at least one relative that is living abroad. And we have also a strong internal migration in Guatemala. As I said, it's about 5% of mostly people from rural areas that see themselves obligated to migrate internally in order to sustain a living and create better perspectives for themselves, which then creates pressure on urban infrastructure. Regarding this, we can say that already today, 52% of the total population lives in urban areas, and it is estimated that by 2032, this number will raise up to 75%. And we have been talking about COVID-19 and the effect of the pandemic on migrants. So in Central America, the picture is not very different from what has also been shared by the speakers before me. a lot of migrants have stranded in the countries, in their transit countries, or they have also been sent back voluntarily or well, involuntarily to their home countries or so-called safe third countries under different agreements that have been established in the region. And I would say the biggest challenge in this regard is that returning migrants have faced a very strong stigma in the whole region because they were said to carrying the virus. So there has been literally situations where communities have shut themselves completely down and not let in returnees, threatening to aggravate their life. And so migrants have been confronted with very strong levels of discrimination and also xenophobic attitudes, which has rendered them even more vulnerable and impacted their psychological health. So now we could pass to the third slide, please. To give you an overview over what we are doing in the framework of the joint work program. So for the implementation in Guatemala, two secondary cities with different migration characteristics have been identified jointly with national authorities and partners in the country. So for one part, we are working in San Marcos, which is a secondary city close to the Mexican border with a significant indigenous population. And it's mainly a destiny for internal migrants that leave their agricultural, that come from an agricultural background and that leave their countries, their cities or their municipalities of origin in a seek of a better life. But usually then they are disappointed by the inability to access jobs or services, and then this leads to the problems that have already been mentioned before, as for example the creation of slums, but also the rise of social tensions. And at the same time, it's very important to mention that secondary cities as San Marcos, they play a key role when it comes to internal remittances. Just to give you an impression, in 2019, internal migrants in Guatemala transferred an estimated $500 million in remittances, but mostly without informal, in informal terms, and there were no informal savings. The second city we are focusing on is Amateutland. This is a totally different environment. It's a fast-growing city that is located about 30 kilometers southwest of Guatemala City. And it is characterized not only by an internal rural-urban migration, but also by returning migrants from other countries. And Amateutland is very well positioned. As I said before, it's close to Guatemala City and other bigger cities. And so there are a lot of people commute amongst these cities. And it's due to this strategic location, it has become an interesting place for migrants to settle and develop economic activities in different sectors. So in each of these two cities, the program is working with specific implementing partners that are providing development approaches that take the local context as a starting point. So in San Marcos, the program is being implemented by the Inter-American Dialogue and has a strong focus on finances and remittances. So the interventions are aiming at leveraging remittances for local economic and human development. And the strategy is to build, for example, new partnerships with banks and credit cooperatives that provide then formal financial services for remittances receiving households, so that formal savings can be generated and transformed into credits for the local businesses. And there a special focus is put on the knowledge economy. And then the program is also focusing in San Marcos on an after-school program for about 700 teenagers in order to provide them with opportunities within their countries. Then in Amateutland, our partner is Avina Foundation, who is focusing more on governance aspects due to the specific context of Amateutland. So the challenge is to find effective ways to provide sustainable labor conditions for existing residents, but also for newcomers, and to leverage migration, as has been said before in different presentations, to boost and actually capitalize on growth within the city. So the program activities are focusing on integrating the management of labor migration into the city's plans for reaching sustainable territorial development, but also on building capacity of local authorities in their ability to capitalize on the opportunities that labor migration is offering, and also to build strategic partnerships with important stakeholders, and integrating all different stakeholders, creating a shared vision for the city in order to create a more welcoming and a more, in terms of integration, more sustainable environment for labor migrants. The midterm review of the program has shown that actually in both cities we have achieved very satisfactory results. For example, in San Marcos, the target of formalizing saving is in terms of in quantitative terms, it's $2 million, and to this day already $700,000 have been we were able to formalize $700,000 in savings. However, as in other contexts, the program activities have been delayed by COVID-19 pandemic and have had to be modified. For example, the whole after-school program now has been transformed as on the virtual. In a virtual modality. Now we can pass on to the last slide, please. I would like to finish the presentation just with 3 reflections. So the challenges that the 2 cities are facing are not unique to them. So the idea of the program actually is to use the potential for replicability in Guatemala, but also in the region, using the broad network of Cities Alliance. So it's all about designing and testing local migration management approaches. Then secondly, and this has been mentioned by Ana Claudia and then also afterwards several times, well, the focus is on actually transforming the potential of migration into lasting economic development and the creation of dynamic secondary cities, because it has been not only in Guatemala but also in the other countries where the joint work program is active, the hypothesis that secondary cities in their development make a substantial difference for the development of a country as a whole has been corroborated several times, and so there is a strong we are strongly convinced that that secondary cities can play a very important role in that sense. And then, as a third reflection, well, the approach of the program in Guatemala proposes an alternative strategy to integrate migrants in their host communities to humanitarian approaches that are more focused on protection. But it is important to make sure that both approaches actually can meet and foster inclusive and cohesive urban development and societies. And in this sense, we can say that sustainable solutions are responses both to forced and economic migration, and they actually require a fine-tuning in development nexus in different contexts. And then just to close, well, the area-based approach and this intervention, I think, shows that, or is trying to show that the area-based approach, well, very often suggests that cities take a look at migrants as residents with equal rights on their territory, irrespective of the migration status. And that does not mean that their specific protection needs are not considered and addressed, but it brings the agency of the migrants at the forefront and stresses the potential of migration for sustainable development. So with this, I would like to close, and I thank you very much for your attention and also for this opportunity to present this program in this space briefly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nina. Very much appreciated. And I think you've really, in this final presentation of today, you highlighted some very important points, including the strong need to have a strong humanitarian development and then peace nexus that we've also seen in other contexts. And also, I think what you also mentioned is the high level of vulnerability of migrants and specifically of women and also youth, which I think is also a very important point. Thank you. And the stigma of returnees, I think that we also see in different contexts. And yeah, I think COVID has actually changed a lot of this situation, including for those people who are now forced to return to their places of origin. Thank you very much for that. I'm handing over to Ana Claudia now. We have 4 minutes left, so I think we will not manage to answer any of the questions in the chat, and I think we'll also be very late for a final round of speakers from the panelists. So very sorry for that. Ana Claudia, over to you. And first of all, this session is recorded, so there is a possibility, and we will be able to share the link, and we will also be able, hopefully, in agreement with the speakers, where needed, to liaise people or reply to further questions. Over to you, Ana Claudia, for some closing words. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, and amazing panel. Thank you for all the participants for putting their time and efforts and be here and completely present and sharing your presentations. It's a pity that we don't have time to capture more your insights and your views around the future. I was very curious, but I would like to point out the two main challenges that I can identify from all the presentations, and I'm glad Nina pointed out these issues in her last slide as well. So one is what Nina said, replicability. Right, we saw a set of very good practices, but we know they are exceptional. They are under very progressive, local governments and national frameworks. So that's why they are there. But we have been betting a lot in terms of creating communities of practices, and I saw the exchanges already between Patricia and Sophia exchanging emails. So I understand that the communities of practices, that knowledge exchange can be a strong weapon for us working in the development arena to offer support to cities, to develop capacities and offer technical assistance in terms of generating replication of these experiences. And the second challenge is on continuity. We do have hard political environments in many of our countries and cities. In the case of São Paulo, for instance, there are elections coming up. I see that some governance and dialogue spaces were created. And also, my concern is about the continuity of those experiences as well. So what will happen after COVID, right? There will be an increase on migration flow, a change in the migration flows. How will be the affordability of these families affected, right? And how these programs will be able to continue considering the fiscal restraints, considering the social conflicts and the political crisis that we face. So I believe the response for the major question was already shared by many of the panelists. It relies on governance. Governance at the city level, the formal structures that have been created, the informal spaces, if they can slowly be institutionalized, right, and then combined with informal spaces that will be created and will be there all over. And COVID actually raised a good opportunity for these networks to flourish in all of our cities in Latin America. So I bet the response to the question is governance at the city level, but also governance at the regional level, at the global level, where we can nurture these spaces, the communities of practice, promote exchange of technical knowledge, but also reinforce the political importance of expanding the access to rights and integration of migrants in our cities. So with that, I close my concluding remarks. Thank you, Stephanie, and everybody.
Thank you. I can see we have two actually very interesting questions. One from MMC, from Maggie Mowers, who actually puts a spotlight on something that we're all fearing. That means that we will have a sharp decline in remittances in the next years to come, as many migrant workers are actually losing their jobs in their hosting countries. And the other point is about best practices implemented for safe and equal access to housing. And I think we cannot answer those questions in this session now because we have to close. But happy to, well, Agnes, we will definitely also take your question and we will try to reply to you in an email sharing on the information we have. And Maggie, yes, that's a very important point you raised there, and we hope we can bring this up in further discussions. And well, we all hope the best for the future. With this, actually, I want to thank our fantastic panelists. I think it was a very interesting dialogue. Thank you very much for your time, for the preparations, and also the great interactions. So we hope to see you soon again. As said, the second sequence of this Urban Thinkers Campus is on refugee hosting contexts, which will take place on the 12th of November. And the third one will be on IDP contexts, and we'll be looking forward to sharing more information on those with you. Thank you very much, and have a good day, a good evening, and hope to see you soon again. Thank you. Bye.
Now, yes, bye-bye, Stephanie, Nina, Patricia.